Okay, so in this video, we're going to cover some of the basic fundamental services that Azure provides. We'll talk about resources, we'll talk about resource groups, and what are the most commonly used resources that are available. So let's jump right through into it. So first thing is once you're in the Azure portal, once you're logged into your Azure system, you'll be able to see your homepage, and within the homepage you'll have a bunch of options. So I'll take a minute to explain what Azure portal is. So in the Azure portal, first thing you have the search bar over here where you can search for any resources that you need or the resource groups. Similarly, you can find that over here as well on the sidebar. You'll be able to navigate directly onto the specific resources as well as the resource groups as well. Or you have various other options which we'll not talk about today, but let's go ahead and create a resource group right now. And I'll go on over here, and if you see, I've already created some of it just for the sake of the demo. But when you get started onto Azure, so in order to understand what Azure does, we need to know what a resource group is. Let's take an example. If you've got a file system, if you've got a machine with if you've got a local machine, a laptop, you have a folder in it, and within that folder you have a bunch of files as well. So take a txt file, for example. You have notes.txt created. So when you create that file, you put some content in it. It'll prompt you to save that file somewhere. So you either save it on desktop, you put it on documents, or whichever folder you prefer. Well, when you're putting it on that folder is a virtual location, a location somewhere on your machine, and that folder is somewhere on your C drive or D drive or whichever drive you've allocated it into. What that means is there's always going to be a folder where you're going to put your files in. Similarly, when you create resources, there's always going to be a resource group that you're going to put your resources into. So in this case, when it comes to Azure, a resource would mean anything that can act like a service. For example, a virtual machine, a SQL Server database, or a Kubernetes instance, anything. There are plenty of options that you can choose from, but I'll take a virtual machine as the example for every explanation that I give. So when we take a virtual machine, it's always going to be put into a resource group. So for the sake of convenience, let's first try and create a resource group. I'm going to click on create over here, and it's going to load me the screen which says create a resource group. Under the screen you will find a couple of options. So one is, first thing, it says I need to select a subscription. So I've already got a subscription by the name Azure subscription, so it's pre-selected for me. Depending on how many subscriptions you have, you'll have all those options over here. And I need to give the resource group a name, just like how I create a name for a folder for the files. So I'll call it rg hyphen AC demo 1 or 2 or whatever. So in this case, I have already created a resource group called rg-ac demo. So I'm going to use that. I'm just showing you what needs to be done while creating a resource group. And along with that, we also need to specify the region. So going back to the example that I was giving, when you have a computer with multiple drives, let's say you have an external hard drive as well. So technically speaking, your external hard drive is in a different region than your internal hard drive. I mean, it's all on your table, of course, but your external hard drive is a different physical entity which you can move and put somewhere else, and so on, right? So it's it's a different region than your internal hard drive. So similarly, when we talk about Azure, we're actually talking about a global scale of applications, and we're not talking about a single drive or a single data center. We are talking about territories and regions and availability zones and a lot of those things which span across multiple places around the world. So Azure has put their data centers across the globe. If you see here, you've got loads of options to choose from. Some of these are marked as recommended because, firstly, it is comparatively cheaper. Generally, East US is cheaper, and few of the others are cheaper because they've got multiple servers over there, and they have a lot of other apps that are hosted in there, so the connectivity is really good. And similarly, there are let's say you've created your resource under East US region, and let's click on next. And about tags, I'm not going to talk about tags because this is something that is not necessary. This is an optional field that you can provide. It's not essential for creating a resource group, but it has a lot of benefits which we will talk about sometime in the future. So tags is one thing. Let me click on next, review and create. It says validation passed, which means it's verifying if I have access to create a resource, if the region is if everything in the region is fine, and the provisions, I mean the details that I provided here is correct. All of that is re-verified before it's created. And when you click on create, it creates a resource similar to resource group, similar to what I have over here, rg-az demo. I can click on it, and basically once a new resource is created, you'll have nothing over here. So it will show that there is no resources available in your resource group. So first thing you would need to do is create resources once your resource group is created. So when I click on create over here, instead I think I'll go here because it's a lot cleaner view, and create. So when I click on when I want to create a resource, I jump onto this sidebar, click on all resources, and click on create. I can do that over here as well, all resources, or whichever way I prefer. I'm in this screen which talks about creating resources. So if you see here, there are various categories. We've got the compute, then we have databases. So we'll just talk as of today, we'll just talk about some of the core categories. I think compute being one of the most important ones, database, what else do we have? Storage, networking, and web. And all of these topics that I've just mentioned are essential for all the certifications that are planned by you guys. Everybody who's gonna take up certification will need to know these categories in one form or the other. Whether you're building a virtual machine, whether you're building a web app, whether you're using some sort of a DB database system, um, anything. So for all of this, you need these services. So let's start talking about it one by one. To begin with, let's talk about the compute resource type. So when we say compute, we mean things like a virtual machine. A virtual machine is a very common compute resource type that we are dealing with. So if you have any application, let's say you have a web app, or a Windows app, or web app. Let's take web apps for example. You need that app to be deployed somewhere so that your consumers or clients or end users can pull that application and load it up on their machine as an interface on the browser or wherever. So there are multiple ways to deploy this. You can package it. If you're using a node application, you can bundle it into an npm package, or you can run npm run build, and it will generate a package for you, and you can just copy it and put it onto your server, or you can deploy it onto a Azure virtual machine to begin with. So this is one of the core features of Azure. Virtual machine is something that gets created, and when you click on a virtual machine, and let's see, let's try and create a virtual machine right now. So yeah, we've got these virtual machines. So as I was mentioning earlier, every time you create a resource, it always needs to belong into a resource group. So that's why it's mandatory over here. So let's mark it to resource group AZ demo. I can create resource group right over here as well. I don't need to pick up one of the resource groups that already exists, and it's like creating a folder before adding a file into it. So I'm going to choose the existing resource group. I can give a name to the VM. I can select a region, and if you see here, we don't see the East US that we selected earlier for that resource group, which is why the region for this resource group is not pre-selected. I had selected the region as East US for the resource group, but the virtual machine, the instance, isn't supported, or we don't have an option to create this type of virtual machine in East US. So that's why it's giving these options. We can choose any of it, and as I have mentioned, we don't necessarily have to put all our resources under a resource group in the same region. So if my resource group is in East US, my resources can live in India or Europe or any other territory. So that being said, there are a few other options that I can select. Here I'm going to choose an Ubuntu server because it's reasonably cheap, as well as the size and the services that it offers should match my requirements. It totally depends on the project that you're working on, as well as the client requirements and the scalability and all that other stuff. If you're deploying a Windows-based application, stuff that requires IIS, for example, then you would have to select a Windows image over here. There are Windows servers and Oracle, CentOS, and every other services available. Um, size is something that is going to define how much disk space is available on your machine, and the pricing is all mentioned over here. Depending on which one you select, you'll have all these features enabled. I'll not go into that because this discussion is not about virtual machines. I'll just go ahead and review and create this virtual machine, closing this tab for now and going back to the resource groups. I Let me see. So here we have it. So a virtual machine has already been created. I can open it up and show it to you. When I click on it, it opens up this pane, this section, and it's giving me an option to connect to it. So right now I haven't started it. So basically I've shut down that machine, because of which I'll not be able to connect to it. But if I wanted, I'd be able to connect to it in one of these forms. RDP is the most common one we use for our Windows machine. As far as we've seen, all our VDIs are running on RDP, and there are other modes which we'll talk about in the future.